Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I'm going to be talking about both of the new jobs coming in Dawntrail. Now that we've had all three of our fan festivals for Final Fantasy XIV, I can finally provide kind of an overall thoughts on the various different aspects of things that have been revealed thus far. I've got quite a lot to say on a bunch of individual topics, and I figured there was no better place to start than the jobs themselves, because discussion over these has been quite contentious. People who do like them, people who don't, and the conversation's been, in my opinion, a little bit louder as of late. So I'm going to tackle my first impressions on these jobs from what we've seen in the trailer, in the individual job trailers themselves, and just in some of the discussion that's happened on stage with the jobs after their initial reveals. So first, let's talk about the job that was revealed back at the European Fan Festival in October, in that of Viper. For those who don't keep up with all of the news, Viper is yet another melee DPS being added to the game. However, it is only the second job to utilize the scouting set, previously only used by Ninja, and that's since patch 2.4. So yeah, it's been a really long time since a scouting job has been added to the game. Its primary weapon is a pair of dual swords that then combine into a twin blade. They can swap between the two stances, juggling really fast and technical attacks and slow, bigger hits when it actually becomes a twin blade itself. I gotta admit, the aesthetic alone really does it for me. The reveal especially was just super stylish. It's one of those things that when you see it in CGI, you kind of get ultra pumped. It's also one of those things that when you see it in CGI, you almost start to kind of over imagine how it might look in game. And I think that definitely happened with Viper, going from the reveal in the second trailer back in October to the actual job trailer that we got, where we can see what looks to be in game a more simple and yet expressive aesthetic. You know, it matches what we see in the trailer, but at the same time, it doesn't quite pop. At least it doesn't for me. I'm especially curious how it's going to look in the scouting gear that we get, but we've been getting a lot of great scouting sets as of late, so I'm not that concerned about it. Though I do I guess it kind of conflicts with my mental image, because I guess Ninja's been not alone, because normally it's like, you know, different dye channels or whatnot between Ninja and Monk sets and stuff like that. But I don't know, I guess I just kind of have to get used to the visual of what this will look like wearing the Ninja sets, the scouting sets, versus what it's actually shown looking like in its AF. And that's an adjustment we have to do for every job. What I think was really funny is that the dual swords felt like the less appealing part of the reveal. I don't know about you, but when I first saw dual swords, I'm like, oh, that's cool. People have been asking for that for a while, but that's my way of saying that it's not something I was like crazy about. You know, I was looking for, again, something like a twin blade or something like a big sword. You know, a lot of people want sword DPS, and we have plenty, but they're just all different kinds of swords. And I was kind of like, man, I kind of hope they have a twin blade or something really cool or unique, like maybe a pistol and a sword or a whip and a sword, go Indiana Jones. Whatever. But then when they combined the twin blades in the CGI trailer, it was like, all right, you got me. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want. And I love the transformation between the two. It's a welcome aesthetic dichotomy, at least for me. And that feeling about the dual swords not really being like, oh, you know, I'm not super impressed, that kind of carried over into watching the job trailer itself. You know, on first watch, I was like, man, these attacks, I expect them to be fast. You know, we were told they're going to be fast. We're told that, you know, they're supposed to be less impactful because of the twin blade being the more impactful of the two. But actually, after rewatching it a handful of times, especially before recording this, I've grown to like actually a handful of the dual sword animations, especially the second part in the combo that he does, where he's kind of like juking from left to right and stabbing forward real quick. I'm actually going to like that, and the double slam at the end of the other animation. However, I am, of course, more in the twin blade fan category. As soon as it gets combined and the hits begin to look and feel much heavier, it definitely appeals to me a little bit more. Even if that's going to be the slower section, I mean, like I said, it'll be harder hitting, so I feel like that's where I would get most of my dopamine from this job. The only other thing we really see is this buff skill where, I guess we'll call it trance. To me, it's like a mix of Zidane and Gabranth of the feel that I get from the Viper job. But at the same time, I see that, and you know, actually it kind of repeats in my opinion. Like I kind of get the same feel from both of them. But essentially all we see from the buff is then like a dual sword animation that's like really quick and flashy, and it's got, you know, some crisper sound effects and whatnot. And I don't know, I guess I have more questions about that than I have anticipations. Like, is it dual sword exclusive? Do the skills change their appearance completely in twin blade mode? Is there going to be a benefit to using it in one or the other? Can you enter twin blade mode once this buff is active? Is that something you're going to have to do? Its functional uses just leave me with a lot of questions, but at the same time, I'm more curious about what buff windows are even going to look like in Dawntrail. Are they still going to be 2-minute windows? Are they going to be making adjustments based on feedback? So I can't be that excited or worried about that yet. We have to wait until several months from now when we start getting more actual job information before I can give a full feel on that. All we know otherwise is that the kit is described as highly technical, closer to something like Ninja or Monk. It makes sense, that it would be kind of close to Ninja, given it's another scouting job. And Monk and Ninja have always been kind of close-ish in terms of, I guess, their overall speed. The way that they feel, the way they flow between abilities, very natural, very quick. But at the same time, when I think technical, I think more on the Monk side of things. Ninja, really busy during the burst window, but otherwise kind of laid back, whereas Monk's like a constant setup to make sure that you're getting ready for that 1 minute, that 2 minute, and there's a lot more involvement depending on any sort of little uptime or optimization you need to make. So I wonder where it really falls on the technical aspect. I think this was just a fancy way of saying that it's going to have a fast GCD when it's in dual sword. Overall, I'm a fan, but again, it comes off as a job that I'm kind of glad is in the game to satisfy people who love this aesthetic, like it's their number one thing. It's not something I look at and go, that needs to be my new main right now. And that's not a surprise. I love Monk, and for a melee, it's probably always going to be my favorite. But really curious to get my hands on that one when Dawntrail eventually comes out. More excitingly, as I stopped to write this and actually started looking at what I wrote down, was the more recent announcement in that of Pictomancer. Now, say what you will, but Pictomancer was always the most likely thing to come out of the Turtles. I didn't think it would be Pictomancer for a couple of reasons. One, that I thought it was too obvious, and number two, the green herring we got in the patch 6.5 MSQ that really swayed my vote in the other direction. But egg on my face aside, Pictomancer is something that I was welcoming. I was something I would have totally been excited for, and quite frankly, both of the options I thought were most likely were ones that I was really looking forward to. I also really liked that the hint was essentially a double entendre hint, something that I didn't think would be the case, but kind of worked out. Now, for those who think Pictomancer is out of left field, it's not. It is from a one-off job in the franchise, and not the first time that they've done that. It's directly inspired by Final Fantasy VI's Realm, who is called straight up a Pictomancer in that game. The armor is light and colorful, and it offers an aesthetic that's vastly different from the other casters, who actually all have their own distinct look. Every job has its artifact armor, and they all have that distinct look that we all identify them for, but I've really grown to appreciate the variety in the casters, more so than I feel like I do with the other roles. I don't know if that really makes sense to you all, but this is something that definitely appeals to me, that it seems more like a bright, fun job, and that's very similar to how Red Mage was when it was revealed, but it's got less of a cool and composed vibe like they tried to make Red Mage have, where this is more like an outgoing and fun vibe that it gives off with its armor. That does raise a concern though, because I'm worried how it would look in traditional caster garb. I don't want to imagine a Pictomancer in one of the many robed sets that we've gotten. So this is one of those caster jobs that I feel like will really benefit from the creativity of whoever's glamming for it. Now, another big point of discussion has actually been its spell aesthetic. I actually like the offset color palette that it used, how it looks artsy and I guess I'll call it Splatoony, as many others have said as well. To me, it'd be weird if you were painting spells that looked identical to the game's other graphics. It made sense when we were playing a 16-bit game and basically you just drew the exact sprite that was in front of you. And honestly, that's still kind of captured here. We do get to see that with the Moogle. That's not an artsy looking Moogle. When it's drawing the creatures or the monsters, it's drawing exactly what it would look like in the game. But for just the general spells, when you're collecting the colors for your palette to make the masterpiece that you're trying to create, that being offset actually is something I feel like gives a good job identity and helps separate it from the other graphics in the game. Gives some pop that really helps realize the job fantasy much better for me. And the weapon choice being a brush is no surprise. I do hope one thing though, the actual canvas needs to be treated much better than some other off weapons or I guess the offhand part of the weapon is treated. As long as it doesn't go to being as bad as the Machinist Lunchbox, which has been neglected heavily in terms of the way it's treated glam-wise, then we should be okay. But the brush is always going to be the centerpiece, and there's a lot of room for creativity there. I hope they flex that creativity, and we don't get a dancer situation where it was a while before we got a few decent-looking dancer weapons. Now, the spells in the showcase show different color palettes matching different elements. I don't know why I'm about to tell you what colors they are because I couldn't tell and I'm only guessing based on the spells that were actually cast. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. So red for fire, purple for lightning, blue for ice, and yellow for snow? I think that's what it is in the other games, right? Colorblind person probably shouldn't be playing the Pictomancer, right? Whether they have wind or water will remain to be seen, but I'd imagine it's pretty likely. I mean, even in the actual cinematic trailer, we see what looks to be a giant watery Spriggan, and I'd imagine there had to be water involved for that. Now, we also see the Pictomancer paint a blank canvas over their head before filling it in. I'm wondering if the image on the canvas and the effects of the spell are determined by the colors you've recently utilized. The big question is, what does it actually do for the Pictomancer once they've actually drawn this? Does it just give them access to another new color palette with different effects? Does it give them access to certain monsters relative to the type of environment or picture they have drawn? Is it just a self-buff that you're going to have to rotate between, or even a potential means of accessing your party buff, assuming that the cooldown is available? There's a lot of room for creativity here that doesn't really match a lot of the other things that we have. I know that very frequently we essentially have things like mudras or, sens, which I guess actually might be the thing I'm thinking about most. Instead of finishers, you just have your spells to determine the colors for your palette, and then you paint the pretty picture and bam. I also wonder if you can bring a color combination that doesn't paint anything good, and you just, like a bunny equivalent, where you just paint an abomination that's just hideous and nothing happens. I hope that's not the case, but it does sound pretty funny. And of course, we know they can also paint monsters or creatures. Now, in Final Fantasy VI, Realm just painted whatever enemy was in front of them, but here you're just going to be painting a set number of creatures or monsters. And we see a Moogle in particular being painted in the trailer, and then firing a palm beam. Now, I'd assume that monster paintings share a cooldown and also have different effects. Maybe one's a line AoE, maybe one's a circle AoE, maybe one's a single target attack, maybe one is a buff. That's the big thing. There's really no way to kind of fully dissect either of these trailers, but the Pictomancer one, because it's an art thing, it kind of immediately invokes more of a creative mind, which I'm kind of worried is going to make a lot of us create expectation, and we're going to way exceed what the job could feasibly be doing. So I think the idea we need to nail down now is, do the colors affect the image? How does the image affect the Pictomancer? And how do the monsters fit in? But I'm just thinking monsters are probably going to be something you'll flow through different monsters every 20, 30 seconds. Again, maybe depending on the type of canvas that you've painted. And all of that sounds plenty fun. We also know that they sport several instant cast spells. And one very interesting note is that seemingly in the trailer, they only have a 1.5 second cast time on their actual color spells. Now, to make up for that, they do have, and this is acknowledged by Yoshi P, a very long cast time on actually painting the canvas itself. That's not just an animation from what we're led to believe. That is a full cast that has to be completed. However, their other spells give them plenty of mobility and time to stutter step, so if you need to root in place for something like that, then it'll likely be something you have planned in advance based on the fight and rotation, etc., etc. We also know they have some buffing capability, not a selfish DPS like Black Mage, mind you, but we also know that they have no raise. Now, historically, when there's no raise involved, that has actually made the jobs generally stronger when it comes to their overall RDPS. So the dev team, if they're still designing jobs that way, may put it closer to the upper end of the caster ranged DPS, something probably not quite Black Mage's level, but potentially or close to it. Now, the big problem with making that prediction is we're basing it on how the jobs are designed at level 90, and we don't know anything about how the jobs are designed at 100 or how they're being changed. So consider that kind of just like a nonsense prediction, but at least it's based on something current, right? My overall feeling towards Pictomancer is a lot better than Viper. If I were to pick up something in the caster role, this is actually on the upper end of choices for me. For those who wonder, when I have to pick a caster, I pick Black Mage, and I love the feel of mastering that job and the technicalities of it. Very easy rotation, but down to the fight knowledge, placement, and how you actually use your skills to navigate the fight. And I love how rewarding that is in terms of what you're able to output in return. Now, I don't necessarily get that feel from what we're seeing with Pictomancer, but what I see is a unique playstyle that appeals to me more than the other playstyles that have been set up in Endwalker itself. Something that's a little bit more dynamic, not the word. I don't want to use that word when describing any Final Fantasy XIV rotation, but again, it invokes a bit more imagination when I'm thinking about it in advance, and for now, that's more appealing to me than the few GCD skills we saw with Viper, which just have a few flashy animations and don't really tell us a whole lot or give us a whole lot to speculate on the job itself. As for the overall reveals compared to what other people may have wanted, you know, people want a hammer DPS, people of course want new tanks and healers. There's all sorts of classic Final Fantasy jobs that people have been talking about for a long time, like Geomancer, and also ones that really have no basis in reality, like Necromancer. Regardless, while all of those predictions are out there, while I could want or see any of those other various ones being put into the game, this one felt like a really unique take for me, specifically in that of Pictomancer, with Viper being more of the safe play. It felt like the one that they knew would be kind of cool and edgy and appealing, but at the same time isn't quite the showstopper. I feel like Picto is. Picto at the moment is definitely the one to talk about more. But I'm hoping that Viper finds its place. I'm hoping that when we get all the information, it stands out a little bit more than it does in the initial reveal. And Picto, I just want my questions answered because I have so many, and I'm really excited to learn more about that one. So overall, I'm feeling positive. I'm definitely not in the negative Nancy camp of this one, but everyone is entitled to their opinion. So let me know what yours are in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to like and subscribe. We'll be doing plenty of videos about the various aspects that we have to expect in Dawntrail, as well as some stuff for Final Fantasy XI. Now that we have our first key art for that, that is another video that I'm working on. And fortunately, it was one I was already working on before we saw the key art. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, take care.